Okay, everyone ready? One, two, three.
Cheers! Although it's not wine in this, I wish it was. Mine's
Mine's
Yeah,
actually,
too early.
mine's really boring. It's not even a coffee. I've got water in mine today, but it just looks prettier in this.
mine's a coffee.
Perfect. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Celebrant Sisters. And we wanted to pop on today and have a chat with you about why it's important to plan your last hurrah. So, we're going to have a chat for the next 15 minutes or so about the importance of planning your last hurrah
hmm
and why and how you go about it. And also, you hear about from us about what we want as our last hurrahs. So, let's open it up and talk about why is planning your last hurrah important to do while you're still here?
It's funny, isn't it? Because people spend, like in our profession, especially, obviously, we do weddings, we do naming ceremonies, we do vow renewals, and people spend months, years, loads of money, so much time, like all that effort into planning those. But yet, that celebration that is a celebration of your whole life, not just a, 5, 10, 15 year relationship, your whole life is actually something that people think, oh, I don't want to talk about that because it's to do with death and that's sad, so I'm not going to plan it. And actually, exactly like you say, Miranda, it is important because that is our last hurrah. That's our last chance to actually, celebrate that person and your loved one. And it should be planned in a special way. So, yeah, I think it is. I think it's vital.
Yeah.
Really important. And I think as well, I think you're right, Laura. I think it's the sadness of the end of life and maybe denial or maybe not wanting to think about it. But I think as well, often a family are then left to make all the arrangements and make all the plans. And obviously they know that person, it's their
hmm
person. They have, clear insight into what they might like in terms of music or readings. But why not express your wishes about how you want that to look? I think that's
hmm
really important.
Yeah, and absolutely, that's such a good point as well, because that extra pressure on the family,
Yeah.
it's an awful time when you've just lost somebody that you love, a family member, a best friend, or an awful time as it is to then have to then think, well, I actually don't know what songs they like, or I don't know when we need to talk about what school they went to, or how when they started their first job. It can be, like you say, mentally a really difficult time already. So if we've had a bit more of a say in it before the time comes, then actually it does make things easier
And
for,
also,
family.
Yes,
talking with
definitely.
families, I think one of the things that I find with families that haven't had those conversations is there's a lot of guilt that they carry and wondering, have I made the right decisions for the
hmm
loved one? And there's a guilt that goes on. And I certainly have found that when I was planning my mum's funeral many, many years ago, because we hadn't had those conversations. We'd had
Yeah.
conversations about how to dispose of her ashes, but we hadn't had conversations about the service. And actually, that caused friction within the family because everyone had different ideas.
Yeah.
Just don't want to go
Mm.
through that. So,
Mm, absolutely. And that's a really good point. I think we all do, if you're thinking, actually, yeah, I want to be cremated, we all have an idea of where we want our ashes to be, scattered. And that might be a conversation that's easier to have. But why isn't the conversation being had of the actual funeral, the actual ceremony, like the actual celebration of your life? It
Yeah.
starts there, not just where are you going to lay my ashes? Like, and also, do you want that? Some people don't realize that actually you don't have to just go and be cremated or buried. There are other options and it can be done in a different way. And I think that's the thing. By all of us having these conversations now, it's like a way of opening it up and making it feel like something that's more familiar and people become more used to talking about it. But we're just in Britain, we're just typical that we don't really talk about death very much, do we?
yeah, we
No.
don't.
But definitely, I think definitely in the time that I've been a funeral or celebration life celebrant, I think there's definitely a shift. It's a slow
Yes,
shift, but I'm definitely
absolutely.
seeing when I go to visit and look after families that actually the person who's passed, they may have expressed some wishes.
Yeah.
And as you said, Laura, that does make things a little bit easier for the people who are left behind and who are
hmm
arranging. But also then it's a true reflection of what they want as a ceremony. So I'm definitely
Yeah.
seeing an increase towards that, but probably not quite where we should be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also, how do you start the conversation?
Yeah.
Where do you start? How
Yeah.
do you start to have those really difficult conversations? Because everyone has a different relationship with death. and
Mm.
different ways of talking about it. So what have you seen in terms of how do you even start that conversation?
I think for us personally as a family, I've actually started having those conversations now with my own parents. And I think, like you say, Tara, I think there is so much more conversation around it. And I think we're probably the driving force of that because of us being celebrants and
Yeah.
perhaps being used to it a bit more. But
Yes.
actually, hopefully for mum and dad it's going to be another 10, 20, 30 years, but actually I
Yeah.
think by having that conversation now, maybe it makes it a bit less scary because it's not top of their mind at the moment. So maybe it's something that we think, okay, let's start talking about this now so that when the time does come, it
Yeah.
doesn't feel so difficult. But I think it's just by, I know it sounds obvious, but it's just by doing it. You just have to actually start
Yes.
talking about it and go, okay, well, what song would you like? Maybe music's an easy way to start. What songs would you like to be played at your funeral? That's probably a good place
Yes.
to start, I guess.
Agreed. I think there's probably a gentle way of approaching things rather than
Yeah.
we're calling a family meeting and we're all going to sit around
Yeah,
and
we're all going to
discuss
sit
what
and have
you
a
would like at
chat.
your funeral, because I think that would
Yeah.
feel like, crikey, this feels a lot. But as you
Yeah.
say, gentle conversations around, what music you'd have. Would you
Yeah.
like any symbolic rituals? What are your favorite flowers? All those types of things so that you could build that in as well. So
Yeah.
rather than making it sort of quite formal. But I think, it's not going to be for everybody, and there will still be a large proportion of people who are like, I don't want to think about that, and I'll
Yeah.
leave that to the family. But I think, as you say, gently having those conversations over time would be good.
Yeah.
So you don't even have to have the conversation. You can write it down. So
Yeah.
I did
Yeah,
a funeral last year for a gentleman who only had a couple of distant family and knew that his friends would probably be doing his organizing everything for him. And he'd written down very clearly exactly what he wanted. He
Brilliant.
was very clear about the hymns, the readings, who he wanted to do the eulogy, the design, even to the granular level of the design of the order of service, and what he wanted to happen with his ashes and the wake afterwards. And it just removed the guesswork and made it so easy. I'm going to show you this. This is something that a friend of ours, Katie Costello, has produced, which is called A Gift from Me to You, part funeral plan, part life story, part love letter. You can download these. And
Love
she's
this.
genius. She's only just launched it, but it takes you through everything, the music, how you want to be talked about, how you want to be your body to be cared for, the whole thing, your life story. And
beautiful,
just even having this on file somewhere and saying to your
Yes.
family, when I'm gone, all you need to do is look at this, makes it so
wonderful.
much easier. So it removes that emotion even of
Yeah.
having that conversation.
And I
That's
love and I
incredible.
love the phrase that she's put, part love story, because it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
love story of our lives, and yeah, beautiful, absolutely so special. Love
That's
that.
great as well, the fact that she's put it in there alongside with her experience in the funeral industry. So actually she's going to be asking questions in there that people might not have thought about and might not have considered, like you say about things like what do you want to happen with your body and stuff like that. So that's fantastic. Shout out to Katie because that is amazing. Yeah, really love
Amazing,
that.
amazing.
I
And
mean,
as I was saying earlier, I've got a family that I looked after last year, and the wife passed away very sadly, and the husband actually, his daughter-in-law contacted me and said, we loved you being our funeral celebrant, and this person wants you to look after the family when the time comes, but would you come down to the house, spend some time with him, and go through his life story? Because
Brilliant.
he wants to make sure that that's all conveyed correctly in the right timeline when the time comes for his funeral, rather than maybe having to be reliant on the family members having to remember it all. It's
Yeah.
going to come from him. So I'm going to
Yeah.
go down, take some cake, sit with him, record the whole conversation, so that's there as well for the future. Hopefully
What
not for a long time, but a special, special thing to do.
Yeah, it really is. And I think having it directly from the person is
Yes,
so special. Like I think
yes,
that's amazing. And that's not the first time you've done that, is it? You have worked with people before, Tara, where
yeah,
they know that, they're going to pass away soon and actually they want to speak to you and make sure that it's
Yeah.
the right conversations are being had, and I think that is so important and so special. And you can also get as well, like Katie's produced is obviously incredible because it's got all the extra detail about the funeral, but you can even get those books that are like about people's life story that you can just give them on Mother's Day or Father's Day, or a present
Yeah.
to your partner, or and it's kind of like asking them to share memories with you. It doesn't need to, you don't even need to mention anything about the future and to do with the funeral, but actually I think, like you said, Tara, it's so important for people to be able to ask those questions and know about your life, because there's so many things that I don't know about my family members, you know, really early days when they were children, that I would have no idea how to tell a celebrant their early days of their life. So I think having
Absolutely.
those conversations about life in general is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, Laura, sorry, you hit the nail on the head there. Just really, actually, with dear Bunny, and I know the family won't mind me mentioning her name, obviously, who I looked after last year, but she recorded her own eulogy with me. She
Wow.
knew she was about to pass, but she wanted to speak at her own funeral. So actually, as a celebrant, what a very special moment for me to go to her home, sit with her. It was just the two of us in the room. She was amazing. She recorded it in one take. But it was her wish that she spoke at her own funeral, and she did that, and it was incredible.
That's amazing. Yeah, honestly. And what a gift to that family that you
Yeah.
were able to help with that and facilitate that. It's
And
brilliant.
I think, too, I did some work a couple of years ago. I supported a lady in the end stages of motor neurone disease, and she asked me to come over to the house. And at that point, she was the only thing that she could do was use her hands to communicate on an iPad, and then we'd have a voice conversation. And she said, I just want you to sit here and listen to my wishes so the kids don't have to deal with it. They've had enough to handle. And I think that's what we as celebrants are in a unique position to be able to
Mm,
do. I think what I see a lot is families thinking that they have to do things a certain way with funeral directors, that they can only bring the celebrant in at a certain point. And actually, that's not true. You
mm,
have a lot more choice than I think than people realize.
mm,
So having those conversations sooner rather than later, even if it's not with the family and if it's with us, it means that we are able to come in with the kind of the all of the emotion in a way removed, because we're one step removed from the
mm,
actual family.
mm,
That's such a gift for those people that are here at the end to be in that funeral and listen to Bunny's eulogy and to listen to what the person has shared. It's such
Yeah,
a gift.
definitely.
yeah.
Definitely.
And I think that is the thing. There was another funeral I did last year, and part of the when they were, you know, organising for the funeral, his wife, she found a letter in his sock drawer, and it said to be opened by cousin. I won't say the name in case I get it wrong, but also, you know, to be confidential to the family. But yeah, for to be opened by my cousin, basically, on the day of my funeral. And we kept it, and she said, yeah, that's what we're going to do then. We're going to give it to him on the morning of the funeral, and he's going to open it. And she says, knowing him, it will be something that he wants to be read out and included. So what we did is, when I sat with the family and we planned the funeral, we left that section clear and just said TBC, but this is
Yeah.
most likely going to be the part. And what happened was the cousin opened it on the morning, and it was in fact a letter that he wanted him to stand and read out. And he chose the cousin because he knew that he'd be able to do it. He knew he was somebody that would have that strength to stand up there. And he came and shared this letter, and in the same way it captured his voice, and it was him talking to his family, talking to his
Yeah.
loved ones,
Yeah.
talking about looking after his wife and making sure she's going to be okay, and, you know, just having his voice. And that's something that's always, you know, stayed with me, because I think it is so important
Words.
to have the
His
family
word.
voice, but their
Yeah.
voice as well. And having
Yeah.
their voice in there is just incredible. And,
Yeah.
you know, you see it all the time, don't you? Like, I had a beautiful, you know, family I supported recently, and she found a letter that her dad wrote when he was 16. And she read that out at his funeral because it was his voice from when he was a teenager. And I think things like that, it's just nice having the person's voice in there as well. I think that's what's so, so lovely. So if we can think about that at this stage, you know, and
Yeah.
support families and think, actually, you can do that. If you want to have your own voice in your funeral, if you want to read your own eulogy, how incredible and how amazing that they can do that.
And it's
Very
also
specific.
thinking about other things such as, location. You don't have to be in a church or a crematorium if you don't
Yes.
want to,
Yeah,
or
Yeah.
or how you want to be disposed of. Do you want to have a direct cremation? Do you want to have an attended
yeah,
cremation? Do you want to be? There are so many different ways that you can do that now. Do you want to be composted?
Yeah.
There's
yeah,
or
yeah,
buried. So there are so many different options, and sharing that too makes it a lot easier for people. I've recently worked with a family where they had three direct cremations in a row in the space of 5 months, and they were
Wow.
very clear that direct cremation was what was going to work for them for all
Yeah.
sorts of reasons. But they had those conversations in advance, and actually, when I met with the family a couple of weeks ago, one of the family members said, I've actually got the paperwork right here. I need to complete it because I want to have the same thing because the experience we've had recently has made it very clear to me that that's what I
yeah.
want.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And direct cremation, I think, something that, a lot of people can get confused about. So, Miranda, can you just tell us a bit more about that in terms of actually direct cremation doesn't mean that you can't have a ceremony as well?
Yes, totally. So, for those that don't know, direct cremation is basically an unattended cremation. So, the your loved one's remains are taken away to be cremated without you there. It can be organised through a funeral director. A lot of funeral directors offer it, but you can also go to professional direct cremation services. But I think there is a misconception that because you have an unattended cremation, it means that you can't have a ceremony. Now, my step granddad had a direct cremation 23 years ago, and in those
Wow.
days, you just didn't have. He left his wishes. He said, "I want to have a direct cremation," and that's it. And actually, our family felt hard done by because we didn't have a service and there was no kind of offer of a service. Now, with the world has moved on a bit, and I work with a lot of families who have contacted me direct, and they've decided their loved one has made it clear that they want a direct cremation, but they still want to celebrate and honor them. Um, I've I'm fortunate that where I live, there is a direct cremation service with its own chapel, and so I do quite a few services in that chapel, and to all intents and purposes, it's exactly the same as
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
cremation. Or you can choose to have your service somewhere else, and I've
Mm,
done quite a few lately in
yeah,
private gardens, private
yeah,
homes, pubs, hotels.
yeah,
lovely.
I've got one
yeah.
coming up at a hotel where the person's daughter got married, and it's a very special
Oh,
place for them.
wow.
So there's a
Oh,
link there.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's just
exactly.
yeah, I've got exactly the same mind. I've had three bookings in the last few weeks where it's been two direct cremations. One has been a burial, but it's been two hotels, and I've actually got one in a beautiful farm outside of Malmesbury next week, just because they
lovely.
just wanted something a bit more personal, relaxed, or they've got a connection to the place as well.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a trajectory in terms of a trend there as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's so lovely and really important, like you say, to feel relaxed, Tara. That's a
Yeah,
great point.
yeah,
I think the other thing too that's important to note is I think, and this is where I think direct cremation, but anyway, just in general with funerals, you don't have to do it so straight away. You don't have to feel rushed. And actually, one of the things that I found a lot of families that have had a direct cremation have said to me is, um, it's given us the opportunity to let things settle. And then
yeah,
for us to have a memorial or a celebration of life, days, weeks, months. Actually, I've even got one this year where the person passed away last summer, and they're only
Wow.
getting around to
good
it
for
because
them. Good for
they've
them.
they've let things settle, and they now feel that they've got the headspace to be able to
Mm,
plan. So yeah, I think that's really important. But it's an it is a trend, but I actually
Yeah,
think it's more than a trend. I think it's here to stay because it's
yeah.
giving
yeah.
people the option to have freedom of choice. So
Mm,
Definitely. And you made a really important point there, Miranda. I think we've all experienced grief, but I remember back to the death of my father, and he died very suddenly. I was in a fog really
mm,
for those first few months. And actually, the decisions we made as a family, and it was all fine. But there's things that I would, looking back on myself then in 2019, that I would do differently now by just letting a little bit of time
yeah.
pass,
Yeah.
letting things settle and thinking, actually. we might have done that bit differently. For example, we interred my ashes my father's ashes in a beautiful place in a cemetery, and it's all lovely and it's a lovely place to go. But actually, I might have done something a little bit differently,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
with
And I
some
think
time. Yeah.
that headspace is so important. And there's so much, families have so much, I hate to say it, but admin. There's a lot of admin when someone
Yeah.
passes away as well,
Yeah.
and that's the
So much
last
to
thing you
do.
want. You're
Yeah.
starting your grief journey. The last thing you want is paperwork. But unfortunately, that is the way it works with
Yeah.
all the processes that they have to go through. So actually, to be able to have that, settled down a little bit and ticked off a little bit more, that kind of to-do list, you can then create that little bit of space in your mind and a bit of more clarity. And like you say, Tara, that fog, it's such a life-changing thing that's
Real.
happened. You
Yeah.
need time to be able to let that sink in before you're then being bombarded with more decisions. So I love that,
Absolutely.
Miranda. I like the idea of, that direct cremation and then a few months later actually having the memorial. I think that's really special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one last question here, which is, what would you do for your last hurrah? What do you want your last hurrah to be? Because I think as celebrants, we think about this stuff for ourselves, just as
Mm,
we think about for the families that we serve.
yeah.
And we've had conversations about this. So what would you do? Laura, I'm going to go to you first. What would you
Yeah.
do?
Well, it's funny. You can probably ask me again in 6 months and it might change again. But at the moment, I think natural burial is for me because I am obsessed with being outside and being in nature. My favorite thing is dog walks and fresh air. And there's nothing in my life that can't be fixed by going for a walk and just getting outside. So
Yeah.
for me, that natural burial ground, I think, is something that I would want. However, I don't think I would want the celebration to necessarily be there because I think I want someone to feel like my loved ones and my family and my friends to feel that more relaxed vibe. So I think perhaps for me, maybe I would do, whether this is a thing, maybe I'd do a more direct natural burial that might be with immediate family, perhaps husband, children, family members, whoever's there, and then perhaps after that everyone then goes somewhere for a memorial. And I think that might be something that I'd like to do. But the things I know I definitely want, I want people to wear pink or leopard print because they're my favorite things. And I want live music, definitely, because music is something that I think creates so many emotions. But I've seen live music at funerals before and it's just hit in a completely different way. So I think live music, but also I want some sad live music too, because I think crying is important and I want people to have
Yeah.
that feeling too. I want it to be a celebration of my life and I want it to be happy and uplifting in the right moments, but I want perhaps the committal or a piece of reflection music that's sung by a live singer to actually be poignant, because I think sitting and having a good old cry is really important for us. So
Happy and
yeah.
sad tears. That's why I
Yeah.
always say there's a place for them both. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think a
perfect.
bit of a balance, but yeah, I think natural burial and then a memorial somewhere special for me. I think that's what I would like to do at the moment. I might change my mind, but who knows?
Like, Tara.
Well, really very similar to you, Laura. We are like two
Yeah,
peas in a pod.
we
So
are,
loads
we
of
are
pink, loads of
twinnies.
colour, probably a natural burial. I know I love Queen, The Days of Our Lives. I love that song.
Oh,
I weep at that. So I definitely want to have that.
great song.
Loads of champagne, and I'd want a life-size picture of me on a massive easel as well.
Yes,
So
I'm
that would
so
be at
here
my
for that.
celebration of life. So
I,
that's on the list at the moment, but it's evolving. Could become
Please,
massive.
please, can you just order it now and keep it in the office so that we can see
Yeah,
it in the
just
background
behind
at
me
all
for the next
times? Yeah.
YouTube. Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
I love it. It's brilliant.
We're similar in that respect. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not so wedded to how I want my body disposed, although I
Yeah,
really do at this point like the idea of a direct cremation.
yeah.
yeah,
This is going to sound very weird, and I've not shared this with people before, but for years the reason I wanted to have a direct cremation is that I was unsure that my body would actually go in the be able to fit in the oven.
Oh, Miranda.
Taller now, and I now know, now that I work in the industry, that I will fit in the oven.
Yes,
But and
absolutely.
that's why I wanted a direct cremation for a long time, because I just didn't want people to have to sit there and look at this huge coffin. But actually now, as time's gone on, I'm not even wedded to being in a coffin. I quite like the idea of a shroud.
Yeah,
When my
nice.
mum passed away, she was in a coffin, but she was wrapped in a shroud, and that had been made by a friend, and it was very, very special. I'm also one of these people that's very wedded to the idea of nature, and
yeah,
practices to look after a body and dispose of it in a more um, in a way that honors
Yes.
the spirits of nature. Uh,
Hmm.
so
Lovely.
it could be natural burial, I don't know. But what I do know is I don't want to be have a service in a building and in a big crematorium. I want to have a massive party with a bonfire,
Yes.
lots of bubbly on tap, so I'm with you,
Yay.
lots of bright colours, and
Yes.
at some point I will curate my Spotify playlist.
Yes,
Perfect.
love
So,
this.
Yay.
so I
All
think
these
that's
beautiful
important.
ideas. Yeah, love
Yeah, I
it.
think that's, and I think we should definitely do a whole conversation on the more natural options because I
Yeah.
think
Yes.
natural burial, but also, is it near Utah or in Bristol where they've got the trees and you can be buried under the tree?
Yeah, yeah, at Memorial Woodlands, and I work there a lot. So yeah, they've got so many
Love that.
fantastic options. So we can talk about that at a later date as
Yeah, and
well.
you're like in a little pod under a tree and stuff. I love that. So
Yeah,
yeah, there's options. So I think we should definitely talk about that in
there's
another
there's
conversation too.
a compost service in Seattle that's actually very I'm seeing a lot on TikTok at the moment
Yeah,
talk about the whole process, but also how families can be involved in that. So I think that the world is opening up.
it is.
This is what
Yes,
this whole conversation's been about. So uh,
today, exactly.
yeah,
Beautiful.
really
Yes.
important. Well, I'm going to draw things to a close now.
Yeah, we could go on for hours, couldn't we?
Have,
As
and I've
always.
actually let the conversation go because I know we talked about just doing 15 minutes, but this has been such a rich conversation that I
Yeah,
thought let's just keep
Absolutely.
this going.
yeah.
Um,
Yes.
so if you are still sitting here listening, think about what questions you might have when it comes to
Hmm.
planning your last hurrah. We're here to help. We want to talk about, have these conversations. So if there's any question that we can help answer for you, please comment below in the video and don't forget to like, hype and subscribe so
Oh,
you can
yes.
see when new content goes live. But for now, girls, let's do one last
Yes, one last
Cheers,
cheers for
everyone.
our last hurrah.
Last
woohoo.
hurrah.
Cheers.
Bye,
Cheers,
everyone.
everyone. Thanks so
Bye,
much. Lots of
guys.
love. Bye bye.